Welcome boys and girls, Costine here with a discussion about Creative Assembly's future DLC plans for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires based on the various things that we do know and things that have been leaked. One of the important questions to ask is how many DLCs will Creative Assembly release going forward for Warhammer 3 and what those DLCs will be. Well, here's what we do know. We know that the next Total War game is going to come out somewhere in 2026. It's going to be announced late this year, it's going to come out in 2026, and based on various information, it does seem that it's more likely to come out towards the end of 2026 as opposed to the early part of 2026. That gives us a timeline to work with in terms of how many DLCs we can expect going forward for Warhammer 3. Keep in mind, there are also going to be free updates, maybe another racial rework on the same level as Kislev, though maybe not. We will see with respect to that. I would certainly expect Bretonnia to have a free racial rework, not a DLC. I do expect a Bretonnia update, they have mentioned it, but I would not expect it to be a DLC, because everything that's come out for Bretonnia has been available for free. Just a very important point on that subject. So anyway, if the next Total War game is coming out in late 2026, it is likely that once it does come out, the people that are currently working on maintaining Warhammer 3, they're going to move to maintain that game. Whereas the people that are currently developing it are going to move on to develop the future Total War game. That's how these kind of things work. How many people are currently working on updating Warhammer 3? We don't know. Andy Hall did mention in an interview that they had about 10 people working on Forge of the Castor, so maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 people at most. I would be very surprised if it was 50 people, but it gives you an idea. Creative Assembly may have as little as 200 people in the company at the moment. We know a lot of people were fired. Maybe the company was shrunk down to a quarter of its size after the disaster of Hyenas. And that is their plan. They're going to release a new Total War game, and then they're going to move the people that developed it to work on another one. And then the people currently maintaining Warhammer 3 are going to move to maintain that game, update it, work on DLCs, that kind of stuff. So that gives us a timeline to work with. Roughly 2 years, or less than 2 years. How many DLCs can we expect in that time frame? Well, 3 or 4. And 4 is kind of pushing it. If Creative Assembly was releasing a DLC every 6 months, we might get 4. But suffice to say, that has not happened. And I don't think we should expect it to happen going forward. So 3 or 4 DLCs at most. Whether or not they release the final DLC, final updates for Warhammer 3 before the new Total War game comes out, or after it comes out, or roughly alongside it, that remains to be seen. And keep in mind, this is always subject to change. I think it depends on how well that game is going to do. It depends if that game sells a lot of copies and gets far more people interested in it than there ever were in Warhammer 3, then they're going to pour all their resources in that game. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. So 3 to 4 DLCs. If they were releasing a DLC every half year, or even faster, you would probably expect 4, but I think 3 is the safe number, 4 is kind of pushing it. And that does include the Slaanesh DLC, keep in mind that. So the next DLC is going to feature Slaanesh. Now, what other races are going to be coming alongside that DLC? Well, Creative Assembly hasn't announced anything as of recording of this video, but the general expectation, the one that is almost certain, it is going to be High Elves. And it's going to be the Sea Lord of Katik. Aislinn, however you pronounce that. So, you're going to get the Sea Lord. You're going to get Slaanesh, so High Elves and Slaanesh. What is going to be the third race of that DLC? Well, various indications, not just the leak I made a video about, but various indications point more likely towards Norska than anything else. Norska is something that's come up for quite a while. It's not like just some guy made a post on Reddit. No, Norska was mentioned by various people. Now, I would personally prefer Dark Elves, but it is worth pointing out that is just my personal preference and what I think would make most sense. But if you're going to make a DLC about the Kala who's wandering the world, and they didn't make that point in the vlog, and you're then going to have the Sea Lord, who's also, focused on wandering the world, it will be interesting to see where his starting position is. then I guess Norska would make some degree of sense. What characters, what units, that to me is far less important. I prefer Dark Elves, but it may just very well be Norska. Just worth saying that about what the next DLC is going to feature. So that's one DLC. With High Elves, with Slaanesh, and potentially Norska. There are other options, of course, available for that, like Dark Elves, maybe Vampire Coast, though I would not necessarily expect Creative Assembly to care all that much about updating the Vampire Coast or to do a DLC for Vampire Coast. We will see if they do a free update. Just keep in mind, simply because a race does not get a paid DLC does not mean they're not going to get an update. They've opened the gates with that with regards to Kislev rework, though it's worth saying that the Kislev rework was more about finishing Shadow Change than giving people a free Kislev rework. That's not exactly what happened. Like, they didn't rework Kislev with Shadows Change, they reworked it later on to make Shadows Change far more appealing as the DLC. I think the only race that you can expect a free update for certain is going to be Bretonnia. And I wouldn't expect a DLC for Bretonnia. Maybe a Beastman free DLC. The reason I say Beastman is because most of the Beastman roster is in the game, and they're going to add Slangors with Slaanesh, most likely 100% they're going to add Slangors. And then if they add the Praeton with Slaanesh, then it might just be the case of Creative Assembly. Okay, let's update the Beastmen as a race. They have most of their units in the game, so we're not going to add new stuff to them, but let's give them a free DLC, add Moonclaw or some other character for them. So that would be an option. I think a paid Beastman DLC is not necessarily likely. And you might say, well, the leak you talked about mentioned that. To which I reply, FLC is a term invented by Creative Assembly. Most people don't really care about that term, and especially when you're thinking about like people using translation, Google Translate or something like that, they probably wouldn't call it FLC. Most people certainly wouldn't call it FLC. But that is a point. We do know Slaanesh, we do know High Elves, might be Norska, and Bretonnia, and maybe a couple others for free. So that's one DLC, like Slaanesh, High Elves, part of that DLC. The fourth Lord is going to be a Slaaneshi one, and the third race, we don't know. The next DLC after Slaanesh, the most likely option, is going to be the Monkey King DLC. Creative Assembly has a contract with Games Workshop to release a certain amount of caffeine content, and the Monkey King is mentioned in loading screens for Warhammer 3. Now, if they do Monkey King, and he's going to be a paid Legendary Lord, they're also going to do the Fire Dragon. Whether or not he's a paid Legendary Lord, then you get 2 caffeine, quote-unquote caffeine with Monkey King, but 2 caffeine paid Legendary Lords, or they decide to do Monkey King paid and Fire Dragon for free, that's a discussion. But that means Creative Assembly has the opportunity of tackling 2 other races as part of this DLC. I think a very obvious option would be the Lizardmen, to rework the Lizardmen, to rework Jungle Warfare. If you're going to have the map maybe being expanded over here in this area in Koresh, and maybe a province or maybe 2 provinces in this specific area of the campaign map, that would be a good way to handle the situation with Jungle much better, because Jungle does need a lot of improvements in navigation and all that kind of stuff. So you might very well see Lizardmen, but that's just pure speculation. We know Monkey King is for certain. It would be very surprising if Monkey King didn't come out, and if you're going to get Monkey King, you're going to get Fire Dragon. One way or another. Ian may or may not be added. I think Ian is more fan speculation than anything else really on that subject. But that would be an opportunity to do things like the Lizardmen. They could also use it as an opportunity to update the Vampire Coast. I mean, add another pyro faction that's focused in this area of the campaign map. Just some ideas on the subject. Hell, they could even update Dark Elves if they really wanted to at this point, and maybe move Lokir from his current starting position further down south. Just some ideas on the subject, nothing for certain. That's just pure speculation. But I do expect the Monkey King. I do expect the Fire Dragon. And what else we're going to get? We're going to get 2 other characters for certain. 1 free, 1 paid. And I think it would just be very sensical. If you're going to do Monkey King, it might make a lot of sense to add Lizardmen as part of that and have Koresh being represented by the Lizardmen. I don't think they're going to do a Naga race pack, suffice to say, in Warhammer 3. But yeah, could be an opportunity to update the jungle, could be an opportunity to do a whole bunch of different things and focus on different races. But yeah, I think if you're going to have that jungle focus, Lizardmen make a lot of sense, maybe Vampire Coast, but that's just me. I think it's stretching it with Vampire Coast. Though, then again, we should remember where Luther Harkon starts his campaign, in Lustria. The third DLC that Creative Assembly might look to release would be the Dogs of War race pack. If you look at Warhammer 1 and if you look at Warhammer 2, we got 2 race packs outside of Day 1 DLCs for those games. So we got Beastmen and Wood Elves in Warhammer 1. We have Vampire Coast and Tomb Kings in Warhammer 2. So I think it would make sense if they're looking to do another race pack besides Chaos Dwarves in Warhammer 3, that they would do Dogs of War. It has literally been mentioned in the game files, though just because something is mentioned in the game files does not mean it is a certainty. There are various ideas that developers work on and then they abandon as development goes going forward. This is, however, the most likely DLC that is on the chopping block if Creative Assembly is looking to move on from Warhammer 3 as quickly as possible. So it depends on how much content they're able and willing to deliver for Warhammer 3. And they could also use this opportunity to release the Bretonnian rework that we know is going to be coming out. Or they could add a Beastmen free DLC for the game with Bretonnia at another point unrelated to this. So those are the possibilities. What kind of characters, where their starting positions would be, it is a big question mark. I think you might see Scrag having a different starting position, or you might see the Western Border Princes in this being removed, and instead having a Legendary Lord over here in Myrmidons with this entire province to play with. Just some possibilities on that subject. There's a whole bunch of different characters they could play around with, different start positions they could go with. They might need to make some changes with Mogr, they might need to make some changes with Tyrannessa, they might need to make some changes with Scrags, or they might not make any changes whatsoever for any of those characters, to be certain. If I'm playing a Scrag campaign right now, I don't necessarily care too much about the Western Border Princes, with exception of, getting exotic animals as the Ogres, because that's a very useful resource. But it is a possibility that Creative Assembly could go for with a Dogs of War DLC race pack if they decide to release it. And then for the fourth and potentially final DLC for Warhammer 3, we would have Tanquil for the Skaven as a Legendary Lord. Though really Tanquil should be in Skaven Blight, so maybe they'd make a change with Hicaclaw, or maybe they'd have Tanquil work out differently in a different starting position, but really he should have some relation with Skaven Blight one way or another, maybe some teleportation later on in his campaign, and guaranteed confederation with the other Legendary Lords of the Skaven, given Tanquil's role in the end times. Then you would have Nagash and Neferata. Neferata would very likely start in the Silver Pinnacle. As for Nagash, that's a big, big question mark. Though Nagash's Arb does lie over here, and it is a province he could use. Though, I'm gonna say navigation around this province of the Broken Teeth is pretty painful, so maybe some terrain changes would be in order. Or teleportation stands for Nagash, because behold the might of Nagash. And this could also be an opportunity for Creative Assembly to rework the Tomb Kings if they haven't done so already by that point. And they may decide to rework the Tomb Kings before that. I think Tomb Kings are a race that absolutely need rework. The Vampire Counts are one race that a lot of people, when I ask people in poll after poll after poll, a lot of people want to see a DLC for the Vampire Counts. It is going to be coming. I think it is highly unlikely we don't have Nagash at least, and I think Neferata would just make perfect sense. If you look at a Blasted Waste with the Silver Pinnacle, the way it's designed, this looks like a prime starting position for a Legendary Lord, doesn't it? Over here. So you could easily just put in like Neferata somewhere around here against the Greenskin army, so she takes the Blasted Waste, or move this army over there. That would obviously be how her campaign would work out. Would certainly make the Darklands a bit more interesting, though Darklands are absolutely a very interesting campaign area already. Imagine Neferata taking Zarnagrund by turn 5, though, in your campaign. She could very well do so, though. That would be pretty damn ridiculous, I gotta say. So those are some options of DLCs. What else could they do in the Nagash DLC? Well, it depends on how big they want to make it. I think that the last DLC for Warhammer 3 should be more like an expansion, like Fall of the Samurai, with a lot of work put into it. So you could have more races being affected by it, unique campaigns, so you could have the Empire, you could have Cafe, if Creative Assembly has something to finish with Cafe. Weirdly enough, Cafe was actually mentioned in the league, and I find that just a bit odd to have Cafe as part of the final DLC, but they could do so. They could do a siege character. They could do a whole bunch of different things. My hope would be Vampire Counts, Tomb Kings, Coast, of course, Skaven. So it is likely we're going to get Skaven. Almost certain we're going to get Skaven. We're going to get Nagash. Likely Vampire Counts. So it depends on how far Creative Assembly is willing to go with respect to that DLC. And that would be it for Total War Warhammer 3 as they move on to supporting their next game. Whatever that game may be. Though current information suggests that the next game is going to be Warhammer 4K Total War, which is going to make for a very, very weird game title, I gotta say. How exactly are they going to call it? Warhammer 4K Total War or Total War Warhammer 4K? You know, YouTube is going to love that name due to its length. But anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Let me know what you guys think. I understand that there's people who want, oh, I want more and more DLC. Look, they're not going to do Araby. I think that is highly unlikely. There's many reasons behind that, but one of the things they would have to completely redesign this area of the campaign map, expand it, change Archon, Rapans, other things as well to make Araby. Kinda not worth it. And there's even less info in the lore for End and Koresh than there ever was for Cafe or Kislev. I mean, Araby has something that they could use, but I think Games Workshop is not willing to touch that because of various reasons. I mean, Araby would actually make the most sense, but I also think it's the least likely of the bunch to be covered. I would sooner expect a Koresh DLC than an Araby DLC, but that's where I stand. Stay tuned for more.